Hey everybody, and welcome to The Ordinary Mystic, my podcast for the quiet in between, the sacred mundane, and the journey of waking up. This is episode 1. We're finally here. It's taken me a long time to kind of put this together and decide exactly what I wanted to say, and my hope is that it's a living, breathing thing, and so that'll change and adapt and grow and form into a whole bunch of new things. But today I want to focus on, or begin with the question kind of behind it all: why does this exist? Why does this podcast exist? What does the idea of the ordinary mystic mean, especially to me? And hopefully that will translate to you. So this podcast exists because I want to follow this thread of what I would call ordinary mysticism. You know, for a long time, I thought mystics lived on mountaintops or in monasteries or hermitages or, you know, behind walls where they didn't speak. They wrote books, they saw visions, or when they did speak, they spoke in riddles, parables, those kinds of things. But I'm a dad. I have 3 daughters that I'm trying to raise. I like to play golf and give golf lessons to make a living. And I lead a very normal, ordinary life. And how is that mysticism available to me now? And where can it be found in the everyday life? And I think that it's found in our kitchen sink and taking out the garbage and our kids falling asleep on our chest, in our golf swings, right? To be an ordinary mystic is to be someone who looks for God in the unspectacular. And not because we're holy or we're looking to be famous or enlightened, but because we finally stopped pretending that we need to be, and we finally slowed down enough to see the life that's kind of right in front of us. And so that's why this podcast is kind of getting started and why I've called it The Ordinary Mystic. You know, I've spent over a decade kind of unraveling from the faith that I grew up from in some ways. Dark night of the soul, as John of the Cross would say it, but mine was more of a decade-long dark night. It started when I was about 21 or 22 years old, and you know, another reason that I started the podcast is I want this to be what 21-year-old me needed. You know, when you go through something like that and you have no idea what it is, there weren't a lot of people or voices out there who knew what to say or how to guide me through it. And now that I'm on the other end, it's not that I was looking for answers, but, you know, somebody to be on the path with me. And that's hopefully what I'm able to offer here. You know, you're not broken. There's not something wrong. It may be messy and it may be all over the place, but what I didn't need was more certainty. What I didn't need was another sermon telling me to read my Bible or just pray or pointing to a chapter and verse. What I definitely didn't need somebody to say was that I was wrong or a heretic or, you know, insert word here about lacking faith or backsliding or something like that. But I needed somebody to kind of sit beside me. I needed to know that doubt wasn't the opposite of faith, and I needed permission to kind of stop performing and start listening. And that's why this podcast exists. My image of God used to be one that I needed to be seen as a leader. I needed to be seen as important. I needed to be seen as somebody whose outward life provided a ton of value. And I was addicted to the certainty of that version of faith, that worth that I had kind of earned, not only through Jesus, but through like my hard work. But underneath all of it, there was still something deeper. You can hear my computer going off in the background, sorry. But there was something deeper. There was silence, there was stillness, there was a voice, and not an audible voice, but something stirring within me that wondered if this was all there is. And I've been trying to listen to that voice ever since it came up, and it's taken over 10 years. And the thing that I've noticed more than anything is I don't have answers, but I'm fascinated by the questions. And So that's what this podcast is or isn't. It isn't for answers. It's for you and me, maybe, who's waking up to the reality that's always kind of been here the whole time, to the ones maybe unraveling, or the ones learning to walk with that mystery and hold it in new ways. You don't have to be extraordinary to live a sacred life. You don't have to be the Thomas Mertens or the John of the Cross or John the Baptist, where you're eating locusts and wild honey and dressing in sackcloths. You don't have to be those things. Maybe you're in the middle of a transition or a question and you don't know what to do with it. Welcome. This is what this is here for. So that's kind of the why behind it all. And I'm hoping that this finds other seekers, other people asking those questions. I don't have an outcome that I'm hoping for, but I do hope that this helps people see or find a community of like-minded thinkers so that you're not alone. So you have people that can stand with you through their journey, and that there's a space for that with this show. And there's some truths that I need to say out loud. There's some things that have been bubbling up for 10, 12, 15 years, and I need to get them out. And what better way to do that than on this show? And then the last thing I'll say is, or question I'm trying to answer is, why does this matter that I do this now? First of all, I want to, right? And we kind of get to be the creators of our own life. And so if we want to do something, you can do it. But I think there's this emergence of spirituality for modern times. I think there's this new, and my friends Scott and Caitlin Elliott have a podcast called So What Else? And they just talked about this on an episode of their podcast, of this new wave of slow spirituality, which actually isn't new at all. But this new wave of, we're going to see Christians, people of spiritual life and faith and formation, really slow down. This slow spirituality that they don't have to go out and get and earn, but just comes to them through silence and solitude and quiet, and not trying to attain anything or live this spectacular life or by this set of rules, but by just being, right? You are not a human doing, you are a human being. And so exploring those topics and a lot more. And so practically, what does this look like? My plan is to post once a week, most likely dropping on Tuesday mornings, but we're going to probably mess with that a little bit here getting started. And you can kind of expect a lot of me, maybe on a topic or just something that I'm learning about or finding fascinating or writing about as well, that I want to bring up here. But also hoping to interview some friends or get into some dialogues with friends and some thinkers and just people that I find fascinating about how they're living their life, working their craft, those kinds of things. So a lot of fun, I think, and exciting stuff coming in the future. And I'm really, really glad you're here. So you can always find me here, wherever podcasts kind of come out, Apple, Spotify, iTunes, all of those kinds of things. You can also find me on my website at www.ordinary-mystic.com, ordinary-mystic, or on Instagram at the.ordinary.mystic. You can find me there. And I'm also on Substack, which you can get to through my website. But if you want to go directly there, I believe it is theordinarymystic1.substack.com. So that's where I'll do my writing stuff. You can check out my website to see what I've got other cooking up. You can join the email list and all of that kind of fine stuff. But thank you guys so much for being here. And until next time, pay attention. The divine hides in plain sight.